It's time for our first F1 track in this series. This takes us to the raging cauldron of an inferno that is Phoenix in Arizona. The track hosted 3 Formula 1 races from 1989 to 1991. And let's just put it this way, the date for the 1989 race sure as heck made certain that the drivers and teams would get to experience every single energy sapping degree. Although admittedly, this wasn't entirely down by choice. You see, F1 already had a Grand Prix in the US, in Detroit. The deal for that race was meant to last until 1991. However, in late October of 1988, Detroit said they wouldn't spend the money necessary to get the track facilities up to scratch. Bernie Ecclestone was rather keen on keeping a race in the US, and so the talks with Phoenix accelerated, and a 5-year deal was put in place. This was formally announced in mid-January of 1989. This meant that the event would have to take place in the roasting desert heat of June. Otherwise, it would cause a logistical nightmare. The degrees came with a vengeance, all 38.3 of them to be exact. This heat would turn out to cause problems for the track as well. The Formula Atlantic series had a manhole cover come up, as well as the track surface start to come up during one of their sessions. Now, as we've discovered already in this series with the Miami circuit in episode 2, if the track starts to come up, the optimum solution in this scenario is to lay down some quick curing concrete onto the broken surface. Like it did at the Bayfront Park circuit, it worked here also, with no further issues to the track the rest of the weekend. One thing that would probably get the drivers in a right snot is having to drive past corners where sponsorship banners reading Iceberg were displayed, in over 38-degree temperatures. Plus, it's not as though some of the banners are small either, and it had to go past it 77 times, as that's how many laps the race was. Imagine being one of the drivers trying to quell the thoughts inside your head about cooling yourself down. All thanks to the big billboards about a clothing company. Aside from that though, I think that this track actually has quite a lot going for it. I think it's perhaps right to explain that just because this series is called Street Track Failures, doesn't mean the track itself is an outright disaster. The first episode, for example, was about a track that was actually really impressive. The failure part of it more came as a result of its planned longevity, and how it ultimately didn't meet that longevity. Street track failures don't just come around because of a poor track. In my eyes, the first edition of this, yes, there was a second variation later in its history, but we'll come to that later, was actually quite good. It's refreshing to see a street track that actually has width, proper width. Stretches of road where you can fit 3 cars wide and it not be a tight squeeze. It promotes overtaking opportunities. It's almost like an open invitation. The road is putting a hand out for the drivers to have a go at making a move stick. Now, because it was F1 in the late 80s, early 90s, the gaps in car performance were pretty disparaging. So perhaps this was not the best series to demonstrate this track's good qualities. To be honest, modern F1 would probably work really well here. However, the obvious highlight to demonstrate this track and its raceability is the iconic battle between Ayrton Senna and Jean Alesi. Also, considering the roads that the track designers were given, they were able to make a track that had a high average lap speed. Average laps and race pace of around 90 miles an hour. Yes, I know these are F1 cars, but by street track standards that's pretty impressive. Also, if any accidents occurred, then cranes would be on hand to pick the cars up, a bit like what they do in Macau. However, this track wasn't faultless. The entry to the pit lane did look a bit awkward. Being midway through a fairly high-speed corner, you most definitely need to pull the anchors a bit mid-corner to try and enter cleanly. However, one of the big issues was crowd numbers. For the first event, the organisers were hoping to get a crowd of around 40,000, which to be honest seems like quite a low marker to aim at. In the end though, they didn't even get that. A crowd total of 31,441 was achieved, on a track that's 2.3 miles, or 3.8 kilometres, in distance. That is rather disappointing to say the least, but if 1989's crowd total was disappointing, 1990's total is almost sick-inducingly embarrassing. The total, all whilst not a specific figure, was around 10 to 15,000 people. What's perhaps even worse, as if it couldn't be much worse anyway, The race in 1990 was held as the first race of the season in March, where the temperature was down from 38 to 18 degrees, temperatures which are much more comfortable for crowds to sit in the grandstands. For 1991, the track had been modified. It was a tad shorter than the previous one, but the course now included an open exit hairpin with right and left kinks respectively, returning the lap towards what would be the original track's turn 9. However, this track didn't seem to make any difference in terms of attracting a greater attendance. In the end though, the contract was cancelled by F1 after just 3 years. There were a few reasons going around as to how the event was cancelled. One of them was the desire to get the South African GP back after apartheid ended, which would be at the expense of Phoenix, or that the attendance was so poor that it wasn't worth continuing. Bernie Ecclestone though said in an interview that the reason the Grand Prix was cancelled early was because of the inability to put more than 20,000 seats in a position where people could see more than a small part of the race. Not holding back, is he? And that was that. The Phoenix Street Circuit was no more and had fallen by the wayside, unlike what Phoenixes are meant to do, which is rise. However, don't think that the city isn't proud of its past as being the host of a Formula 1 Grand Prix, because one of the residents of the city commissioned a painting of Ayrton Senna to be created onto a building which is a kilometre south of the circuit. It's the sort of thing that you'd see in Ayrton's homeland of Brazil. However, I'm glad that this track gave some people memories fond enough that they thought it would be worth the effort to have a landmark that recognised that track's history. That though is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Was this a good street track? Do you think it should have been given a longer time to try and shine? Or do you think it had its moment in the spotlight? Say what you think in the comment section, along with any other street tracks you'd like to see me make a video on. Also, given it's that time of year, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Or if you're watching this after Christmas, then I hope you had a good Christmas. Or if you're watching this in a time where we're not even close to Christmas, then I'll round off by saying, until the next video, enjoy the rest of your day.